Hey, back with Fuzzy Mud, Chapter 4. Marshall Walsh. Marshall Walsh wasn't as brave as Tamaya thought. He used to have lots of friends. He used to like school. He had taken band in the 6th grade, and his music teacher, Mr. Rowan, had written on his report card that what he lacked in talent, he made up for in enthusiasm. Marshall plays the tuba with gusto. He wasn't enthusiastic about anything anymore. Each day brought him nothing but more misery and humiliation, and it all had started with a new kid in class, Chad Hillegas. Students attended Woodridge Academy for one of two reasons. Either they were really smart, or else their parents were really rich. Tamaya was one of the smart ones. Marshall was an in-betweener. His parents weren't rich, but they both had good jobs and they considered education to be extremely important. They cut back in other areas like family vacations and going out to restaurants. The reason Chad Hillegas came to Woodridge was entirely different. He had been kicked out of 3 schools in the last 2 years. The social worker assigned to his case believed that if he was placed in a more positive environment and made to wear a school uniform, he would stop fighting and become a more conscientious and motivated student. If his parents hadn't agreed to pay for him to go to Woodridge Academy, he would have been put in a school at a juvenile detention center. So Chad had started with everyone else in September. The boys in Marshall's class were in awe of Chad. The girls seemed drawn to him too, even if he also scared them a little bit. And for the first few weeks of the year, Marshall had been right there with everyone else, hanging on every word Chad said, nodding along in agreement, laughing at his jokes. Some people were terrified of being expelled from school. Chad bragged about it. My 4th grade teacher kept giving me a hard time, so I locked her in the closet. What'd she do to you when she got out? Nothing, she's still in there. And Marshall had laughed right along with everyone else. Chad claimed he'd been kicked out of 5 schools, not just 3. He was always coming up with new stories about things he had supposedly done. The more he got in trouble, the more everyone seemed to admire him. Marshall remembered the moment Chad had turned against him. Chad had been telling about the time he had ridden his motorcycle to school. Did anyone see you? Gavin asked. Yeah, they saw me, Chad replied. I rode it right up to the steps of the school and into the principal's office. No way, Marshall exclaimed. Chad stopped talking and slowly turned to Marshall. Are you calling me a liar? Everyone became very quiet. Marshall hadn't meant it that way at all. He just as easily could have exclaimed, awesome. No. You all heard him, Chad said. He called me a liar. Anybody else think I'm lying? Marshall tried to explain, but Chad shredded his feeble words with a cold, hard stare. For the rest of the day, that stare seemed to follow Marshall wherever he went. And for what seemed like no logical reason to Marshall, slowly but surely, everyone else seemed to turn against him too. Whose side are you on? Chad would ask. You're either with me or you're with Buttface. At first, Marshall tried to pretend that nothing was wrong. He'd walk right up to a group of his friends and try to join in whatever they were doing. But one glance from Chad would send him away, his eyes cast down in shame. Snide whispers followed him wherever he went, along with not-so-accidental bumps in the hallways. He became afraid to speak up in class. His grades got worse. Often, when taking a test, he could feel Chad's stare burning through the back of his neck, and his mind would go blank. In other schools, where 7th grade students changed classrooms every period, Marshall and Chad might have had only 1 or 2 classes together. There were only 41 7th graders at Woodridge, however, and it was Marshall's bad luck that Chad was in every one of his classes, except his last period, Latin. Marshall had a brother and sister, twins, who were 4 years old. Even when he'd had friends and lots to do, he had always been happy to look after them when necessary, or even when it wasn't necessary. Daniela and Eric liked to pretend they were lions in the circus. They'd crouch on top of the kitchen bar stools and growl, and Marshall would be the lion tamer. Since losing his other friends, Marshall no longer liked playing with the twins either. It made him feel like a loser. When his parents questioned him about his bad grades, he blamed it on them. How am I supposed to study when they're roaring at me all the time? It was the same with Tamaya. Everyone picked on him all day at school, and now he took it out on the only person who was nice to him. He'd hear himself say mean things to her and hate himself for it, but he just couldn't seem to stop. As bad as it had been for Marshall lately, today it had gotten even worse. He had answered a question in class right after Chad had given the wrong answer. Afterward, as he was heading up the stairs on his way to Latin, Chad grabbed him from behind, pulled him down 3 steps, and shoved him against the railing. "Listen, buttface, we need to settle this once and for all." "Settle what?" Marshall tried. "After school, on the corner of Woodridge and Richmond Road," Chad told him, "and you better be there." "You thumb-sucking coward." Marshall and Tamaya always walked right past that corner on their way home. They'd been going the same way every day for 3 years, but today he suddenly knew a shortcut.